All right, great. It's 9:01. We're going to get started here. And just a couple, well, first off, welcome, and a couple of housekeeping things that we're going to run through. Taylor, you want to run through this?
Yeah. Hey guys, I think I know most of you here. If I don't know you, I'm a client partner with Navara Marketing. Basically, just quick housekeeping here is if you can't hear things, there is an audio setting down in the corner there, and then you can click on that. Just make sure that your speakers and your microphone are connected correctly. And then if you do have any questions, we ask that you ask them through the Q&A box down in the bottom bar, and we'll get to them as they come in or at the end of the webinar.
Perfect. Awesome. So I'm going to just get started here with I'm going to start it off with just a little story. My very first lead gen website as an entrepreneur was in real estate. And, I was convinced it was going to absolutely crush it. It looked incredible. I had a clean design, a sharp logo, beautiful photos. I hit the publish button and thought, here come the leads. I had paid ads running and nothing, crickets. No calls, no form fills, just me refreshing my inbox, thinking something was going to magically change. Now, keep in mind, I left the corporate world where I was working as a website developer. So I knew what I was doing, but the difference was I worked on huge corporate style websites like Dell, MetLife, e-com sites like kennethcole.com, right? Now, back to my website, I had traffic from ads. That was not the problem, but I had zero conversions. And that's when it hit me. I built a site that looked amazing, but not one that was built to convert. The headline was all about me, my company. The call to action was weak. The messaging was vague. There was friction everywhere you went through the site. So I sat down and I rebuilt the site, but this time I focused on clarity, strong offers, obvious next steps, removing friction, and taking a direct response approach, but basically a Dan Kennedy styled marketing approach. And almost immediately, leads started to trickle in. It was the same traffic because I was using paid ads. It's just different strategy. And that's the moment I learned for small businesses, websites don't generate leads. Optimized websites generate leads. Fast forward to today, Andrew and I have built hundreds and hundreds of websites in the energy sector. And today we're going to show you exactly how to make that shift, how to make the improvements on your own website, and what to look for. And I believe there was a poll that came up. If you could take time, just go ahead and fill that out. And let's jump in here. Andrew, you want to get going with this one?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Some of the things that we typically see when we go into a new engagement, where the website is up for, renewal or a refresh, and it is something that we take immediate look at. And these bullet points you can see here are some of the questions that we'll ask and sometimes assume just by taking a look at some of the websites that we look at on a day-to-day basis. And the common response is, I'm not really sure what my website does. I know it's there, and I know I have to have one, and and stuff like that. But as Brett talked about, we build optimized websites, that are built for speed and built for conversions. They're not just billboards. So just wanted to kind of get that kind of out there, out of the chute here, and then Brett, we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, and then just a little bit of a backstory, as far as Navara Marketing goes, and Andrew and myself, like I said, we've been working in the energy sector for years. We've done so many of these sites. So there's a lot of commonality that we see in sites that perform versus sites that don't perform. So coming off, the very first thing is generic contact us pages. Andrew, you want to jump on that one?
Yeah. Again, back to, kind of first glance at, whether it's, new or existing businesses that our clients have acquired. A lot of the times we see whether it's just one form where a lot of the calls to action drive to like the contact us page. And that is in our opinion, a huge no-no. We build, as we're going to continue to use this word, optimize websites that have a particular form for every vertical that you offer, whether it's different types of fuels, HVAC services, electrical, plumbing, any home services. But we build forms that are not generic. They're catered to what that person's on that particular website page for. Like I said, whether it's a fuel page, an HVAC service page, that way they feel like, wow, like they're my lead, that's my form fill that's going to this company is going to be heard in a way that feels like is very direct and is getting right to the fix or the reason for my inquiry. The contact us approach or strategy, we feel is just not necessarily a great strategy, and it just doesn't convert the way that the other ones do.
Yeah, I mean, it's from a website implementation point of view, slapping a generic contact form on the contact page and then just driving from all the other pages to that contact page. It's a lazy approach. And it doesn't give you the insights into why that person's contacting you versus doing it in this manner, where if you're on a propane delivery page on your website, and then there's a propane delivery specific form on that page, now we know that that contact is talking to us and we can communicate back to them specifically around propane delivery. And that goes for every service that you do on the wet side of the business, the dry side of the business, if you're involved in HVAC. But we absolutely take the time to silo the forms to match the pages that people are on and the questions that go on the forms to make sure that we're profiling the lead correctly. All right, Andrew, problem number 2.
So again, just some common, mistakes and items that we see, is the brochure style, website, or the brochure style website pages that, are full of and polluted with stock photography, that doesn't represent techs that are in people's homes, drivers that are dropping fuel, at people's houses, and stuff like that. We like to call them trust signals. Like when people are there looking to maybe upgrade their system, they're like, oh, that's the guy that came and, serviced and did my tune-up, last season. It's like, oh, he's the guy, and so there's trust there, and it builds, some trust in, the company. The other thing that we see that like drives Brett nuts, I know more than myself, but people have like outbound links to whether it's like, Mitsubishi's pages or, any of your other companies that you guys are buying equipment from and stuff like that. We never want someone to leave your website. And when they're interested in, upgrading or adding pieces of equipment or adding more, to their home when it comes to like a fuel capacity, that we don't want them going anywhere. We don't want them leaving. We want them to stay with you and you be the one that facilitates that next step. So, what is that next step? And so we try to make sure that there's a clear path to the end game for them that is coming from you as the company they're going to for that particular business.
Yeah, I got to say that most of the sites that we take on with new clients, we see this approach. And it's you spend a lot of time and effort getting people coming to your site. The last thing you want to do is then send them off to a manufacturer's site because you want the affiliation with Mitsubishi, for instance, or Roth if you're doing oil tanks and et cetera. So yeah, we definitely want to keep them on your site.
And Brett, not to get into like too much technical stuff, and I know you're going to touch on that later, but sometimes people think that like, oh, if I add the link to Mitsubishi's site or I add the link to Energy Kinetics sites, like that's going to be a really good backlink and that's going to help boost my SEO score or my rankings and stuff like that. I feel like this is just a good moment just to kind of just touch on that quickly.
Yeah. So again, not to get too technical, but that actually is not a backlink that you're building when you do that. It's a backlink for the manufacturer. right? You're giving the manufacturer a backlink from your site. So it's an outbound link on your site. And what happens then is the bot, the Google bot, for instance, is a piece of code that crawls through your website and it follows all of the links on your site. When it comes to one of these links, the bot leaves your site. It's actually going to now Mitsubishi's site, for instance. So you don't want that to happen. You want to trap the bot on your site. There's other ways to have the association to the manufacturer from an SEO point of view. To move on here, so some of the things that you can do as changes for making your page convert better. This was the trap that I ran into when on the first site that I built in real estate, right? I didn't focus on this kind of stuff. And then making these changes, this is what actually starts to drive conversions up. So making sure you have clear headlines and speak the language that your customer or your prospect understands. So you have to disassociate your internal lingo and language and make it more generic to the general population so that they understand your services clearly. The trust elements, Andrew touched on this, but things like your own photography, right? You're building your brand. Everybody can go out there to Getty Images or Canva and go grab, generic photos and stuff like that. And it just doesn't portray your brand in the best light because everybody else is doing the same damn thing, right? Whereas if you take the effort to have professional photography done, and in this world or day and age, I mean, literally, you can use your own iPhone as well to take these photos, as long as you're, have a good eye for what you're shooting, and use that on your website. There's other benefits to that as well. Not to get too technical here, but every time you have an image that has your logo impression made on your website, there's some stuff going on behind the scenes with AI and with Google and all the other search engines out there that start to associate the brand and the logo together. It just helps to build your site. So it's just a little bit of a boost that you get, from that angle. The other thing is clear, obvious call to actions. That's what a CTA is, call to action. So those are buttons. So on mobile devices, make sure that it's a click to call so people can actually click the phone number and call automatically. Make sure that those call to actions are things that we call a jump link that will move the person down to the form to fill out the form to capture the lead. And then also just make sure that the site in general operates on a mobile device. And one quick thing on this one is actually test it on your phone. Don't rely on, a desktop browser looking at it in condense the screen. Actually test it on a live mobile device because that's the true indication of what it's going to look like. And you want to make sure that everything is legible, that the font doesn't get too small and all of that kind of stuff, because all of that plays a factor into being able to convert that prospect into a lead. Andrew, anything else to add on this one?
Yeah, just with stuff like this, we have a Navara Power Score, and it encompasses all of your marketing, but your website is definitely a major element into what the score ends up with for your overall marketing. Check out our websites, navara.com/power-score. There's a headline right on the main entry point into our website. Click it, go check it out. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. It's free to use. Go ahead. We suggest everybody does that. All right, moving on. Andrew, you want to talk about this issue?
Sure. So our quote at Navara is confused mind says no. That's always been our motto when we're going and building and the infrastructure of websites. Like, how easy can we make this, right? A lot of the times traffic's coming to your site, whether you're a fuel dealer or an HVAC company, and they have had a bad experience, or their current company is not answering them. Like, this is your opportunity to showcase how good of a company you are and make it as easy as possible to enter into business with them. So, a lot of the websites we see, they don't have enough call to action buttons. Brett talked about jump links. Like if someone is at the top of the page and they're like, yes, I want to fill out a form, don't make them scroll all the way to the bottom. If they hit the button, it jumps right down to the form. And then just clear direction, on what happens next. If they fill out the form, what happens after that? There's a follow-up email. There's a revolving message that says, thank you, Mrs. Jones, for your submission. One of our sales representatives will be reaching out to you in the next 24 hours. Please stand by. And also an email follows up and says, Brent, the sales rep from XYZ Heating Oil is going to be following up with you in the next 24 hours. It reassures those people like, wow, that's a different experience than I'm used to with either my previous company or just in general when it comes to online communication within websites that they've interacted with. It reassures them. It gives them some confidence that this company is going to do exactly what they need them to do. And that builds longevity, throughout the years, and you get more business out of that person if you convert them.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, back in the day, it used to be people would load up websites with a ton of content because of SEO. And you end up with these pages that are just text heavy pages. And we put heat map software on sites, and we can see where people drop off as they go down a page. And we can see where the hot spots are, where the cold spots are on a site, which we do when we launch new sites. So we get an indication of what registers with the prospect, with the client, what resonates with them, what's creating the conversion. So that's really important. But when you do pages that are so text heavy, you just lose focus. People go below the fold and they drop off. They just leave the site. So making sure that you don't create pages that are confusing, make sure that they lay out nicely, minimize the content. There's other ways to deal with the whole SEO side of things. Focus more on the user experience on the website and making sure that you have direct line of communication to what they are looking for. So make it easy for them to find what they're looking for. And here's an example of on a mobile device where we have a slew of call to actions above the fold. So when I say above the fold, that means when the site first loads, the page that they hit, it's what's displayed before they have to scroll. And in this scenario, I have my phone button right here, very prominent underneath the logo. I've got these two call to action buttons down here, become a customer in my account. And then also that's mirrored up at the very top here. So again, that's what, 5 call to actions, all above the fold. And that's a very typical approach that we take. And they obviously change based on the type of page that that person has landed on. But it's super important that you do this, and not just above the fold, but then also as people navigate down the page, you are reinforcing call to actions throughout their journey on the page. Andrew, anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I think one of the checks and tests that we put our websites through is how many actions can you take in 3 seconds as soon as you hit the homepage. And that's always a good test for us to know, like, is there enough? Do we need more? Is there too much? I think that's a good gut check that we use, for especially new sites. And also when we get to existing sites, when we're looking at them on what they lack or what they need.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually a test that we have built into our own AI tools as a quality check before we launch sites. And here's another, we didn't really get into paid ads and best practices and all of that, but what you do in a paid ad and the best practice there applies to your entire website. And that's basically, if you're doing some kind of special promotion, you want to drive the traffic to a page that talks to that promotion directly. So if you're doing an email campaign and you're driving it to a service that you do, and you have a service page on your website, you want to drive that traffic from the call to action in the email to that specific section of that service page. Or if you're promoting something that is not on your website in the normal side of the site, then you want to create a dedicated landing page that clearly defines the offer, the promotion, and drive the traffic there, and you will increase your conversions that way. This is huge when it comes to when you're spending money on paid ads. I see this mistake all the time. Companies running paid ads, they're spending money in Google for AdWords, and they're sending the traffic to a homepage or to a contact page, instead of sending it to a dedicated landing page that has what I like to say, 3 actions associated to that page. The user can do one of 3 things. One, they can click the button to call to take advantage of the offer. 2, they can fill out the form that's on that page. And 3, they can leave the page. The only 3 things that they can do. When you do that kind of landing page, you don't have a menu structure. You don't give them the options to go navigate the site because you're using your paid money to drive traffic to a promotion, and you want to be able to measure everything begin to end. The phone number that they're calling is a call tracking number. That's our best practice. So we know if we spend $2,000 this month on a paid ad, we've gotten this many impressions on the landing page. We've had this many views on the page. We've had X number of phone calls, and we've had Y number of form fills. And that gives us our ROI on what we're doing with this ad. Andrew, anything else?
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is just, simple, easy, especially when it comes to landing pages. Not every single person that clicks on your landing pages is going to become a customer, but get a piece of information. If you get an email address, you get a phone number, you get contact information for them, and they don't convert that first pass, if you're doing good marketing, you're going to have another bite at that apple. And you can follow up with them and continue to nurture them through email or text communications and try to lure them back. Maybe they weren't ready. Maybe they were just shopping, but you're going to get another bite at the apple. So if you make it easy for them to inquire, you're going to get more chances if you don't convert on that first pass.
Exactly. And again, that comes back to having specific forms on all of these pages as well, because that's how you segment your list. That's how you can talk to the person specifically in this case with an offer about the offer itself, but then also be able to upsell, cross-sell, promote other things down the road because you profiled that person and that, let's say they came in off of a propane ad, they're a propane customer. But if you also offer equipment, installation and services, now you can talk to that person in the terms of a propane heating system or propane tank, for a fire pit, pool heater, like any kind of the accessory type services that you could offer. So being able to segment your list from the actions of what you do on your website with all of these specific forms really pays off in the long run. One last thing, and again, we're not going to get into super tech heavy stuff here, but some things, again, that we see a lot of issues with on sites that we inherit are slow load speeds. It's really important that your site loads quickly. People are really impatient. If your site doesn't load immediately, they're going to leave and move on to the next fuel dealer that was in their Google search. The other thing is, I see this all the time, sites that we inherit that just have bad technical SEO on the site, and that equates to just lost visibility opportunity. If your site is built correctly, from the ground up, from an SEO point of view and from an architecture and structure point of view, then you increase the chances of your site being found on not just Google search at this point, but in all aspects. ChatGPT, for instance, getting an AI snippet at the top of the search, all of those things play in a factor here. And one of the things that we do on sites now is actually start to code what's called schema and putting that onto select pages. That's actually code that the user never sees. It's behind the scenes, but it instructs the bot, the Google bot, and it actually tells it more information about your website and about that specific page. So that is one way that you can actually accomplish having all the information that you want the bot to understand from a search point of view without loading the page up with a ton of content. So we do that. And then also another big mistake that I see is bad linking structure, meaning all the links inside your site. There's no rhyme or reason to the links. And what happens then is there's no hierarchy for Google to understand, the importance of these pages versus those pages on the site. And that becomes a problem because you want to be as clear, just like a customer viewing the site, you want the automatic programs, the bots out there, to be able to read your site and understand it with clarity. And they do that through good linking and through schema, the programming that's done behind the scenes. And that's about as deep as I'm going to get on the technical side of things here. Andrew, anything else to touch on here?
No, that's the technical stuff is your department. I stay out of that.
Yep.
But
Right.
that was good. I think we had some questions come in. Taylor, was there any questions that you got that came in during the 25 minutes here?
Yeah. So the first question was actually that they said our website's probably 7 to 8 years old. It still works and they still feel like they're getting calls, but how do they know when it's actually time to update it or just leave it as is?
Okay. Andrew, you want me to take the first pass on that? You want to go? We'll tag team it.
Go ahead, go for it.
Okay. So a site that's 7 years old is a pretty old site in the world of the internet. So there's a couple things I would do on it first. If I'm analyzing this, and by the way, I love to analyze sites live when we're talking to a prospect, even when it's an existing client and we're talking about a website redesign. I like to just we jump on a Zoom and very informally, no prep whatsoever. I do a screen share and we just start to jump through the site, tear it apart a little bit, and start brainstorming on things to improve. In this scenario, I would do the same type of thing. So any of the participants here in this webinar, I invite you all to take us up on that offer and we'll jump on a 30-minute call. Usually it ends up going a little bit longer than that because we just start talking about a bunch of stuff. But what I would do first is take a look at the site holistically and say, does this represent my brand today the way it did 7 years ago? Am I proud of this site as a business owner? Is this what I want to project out in the public? The other thing I would do is take a look at the site from a conversion point of view and actually dive into analytics. So assuming that you have Google Analytics running, and if you don't, you should immediately need to get Google Analytics running on your website. But I would look at the analytics for the past year, the past 2 years, really take a look at what are the top pages that people are coming to. Are those the top pages I want my traffic going to? And when they go to those pages, is it clear and am I presenting in a clear manner what we do as a business? And do I have conversions happening on those pages? If you have a lot of traffic going to, let's say, the top 5 pages of your site and you're happy with those pages, but then you realize you're on those pages and you're like, man, I don't even have a form on these pages. The only thing that they could do would be call my numbers up in the header of the site, or maybe I don't even have my phone number in the header. Like those are indications that I need a bit of a redo on my site. And chances are you're probably better off just doing a complete refresh of the site instead of making little tweaks on a site that's as old as 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. If it's a newer site, you can probably do some upgrades to the existing site without doing any damage, with the caveat that the technical underpinning of the site is strong. And that's where you would have to rely on people like us to just take a look at this and give you an honest assessment. And if we come across sites and we say, you know what, this site actually is pretty strong technically, let's make modifications. Or the flip side of that, you know what, there's a lot of structural changes on the site that need to be done. It's more cost effective to just stand up a new site. Andrew, anything else on that?
Yeah, I would just say, we all know that, all of the guys we work with, guys and gals that we work with, in the industry are very proud of their trucks and all of like how pretty they are and what they represent to their company and stuff like that from an asset perspective. And the people that work there as well. So, a lot of times we get to a 7, 8-year-old site, they're like, oh, that guy doesn't even work here anymore. That truck has been sold or scrapped. So just looking at it from, a media perspective is like, is it justify, kind of redoing it and getting a nice fresh media shoot to really spruce up and give a full like perspective of what that company looks like today. Maybe you even went through some rebranding with some of like your different verticals. You're now in transportation and doing a lot more on the commercial side and stuff like that. I would say that would be one on top of what you said. I would say that'd be my ad.
Yeah, and on an older site, I mean, look, you might not have had custom media. You might have been using stock imagery. So that's a clear indicator, like, hey, let's do a refresh here.
Yep.
Taylor, any other questions?
Yes, the next question was someone asked or kind of said, a website rebuild feels like it would be a big disruption to their daily operations with phones, portals, and things of that nature. So, how do we know if the upside is worth the hassle?
Yeah, so I would say, first off, when we undertake a complete website rebuild for a client, we minimize any kind of disruption or pain for our client. So we'll build the new site in a development environment, fully test everything out. And when we go through multiple levels of quality testing internally at Navara, then we'll run through it with the client just before we launch the site. And immediately after the site launches, we go through yet again another quality test to really minimize any kind of impact. The other thing is when we build new sites for clients, again, with the lens of trying to keep the pain at an absolute minimum for our client, we handle everything. So we'll come back to you with questions about certain things, but because we've been in this industry for a long time, we understand the lingo, we understand the services that you offer. There might be some nuance in how you phrase something compared to other dealers, and how you might have a specific type of payment plan that is a little bit unique to your setup. So we might have little questions there, but you don't have to worry about us, coming up with content that's just not on point. And you absolutely do not need to write any of the content for the new site, with the exception being the one ask that I have is the content that goes onto your about page, that you give us some stuff. It might not be the final version of what goes onto the about page, but you give us enough that we can build a great story for you on the about page. That's the one thing that, I really like to have the input from the client, because you know your story the best. All the other stuff we handle for you. And that goes for all the service pages, all the typical, like the standard pages that I would say, like the contact and the home page and all that. And then there's a lot of other strategies that we implement after a site stood up to just continue to build that site and that power and that authority for you over time. And or anything else you want to add on just the pain point of launching a new site?
Yeah, I mean, I think we make it fun. It doesn't feel like a heavy lift or a job. We ask you, like, we have a questionnaire and it takes you maybe 20, 30 minutes. But for doing a website refresh, I don't think asking for 30 minutes of you just to really take a deep dive into it. We ask what kind of websites you like, and it doesn't even have to be in our industry. Like, what types of sites do you like? What things on your old site didn't you like? What things would you like to see? Do you want custom media? Like, tell us the things that you want. And because we do everything custom, we can do it for you. So I think just we try to make the website refresh, website redo process as fun as possible, because we know that that's going to be, one of your major assets that your existing and new customers are going to probably see first when they decide if they want to continue to do business with you or do business with you for the first time.
Yeah, and actually, you touched on a couple things there too. So one is all the sites we do are custom. We're not loading some generic theme and just fitting everything into that theme. We build custom sites tailored to you and your business. The other thing too is if you do have us come out and do a media shoot, it's fun. It'll be a couple days of our media team on site. And really the thing, we just ask that you coordinate that you have the drivers or the techs available, that our guys tag along, and then we take all the shots and stuff. So again, minimize any kind of disruption on your side. We just slot into your business, your schedule, and make it a fun time.
Yep.
Taylor, anything else?
Yep, one last question. So someone said they really haven't had any complaints about their website, and if their customers aren't saying anything, is it safe to assume it's fine? Should they take action?
Yeah. So I would attack that a couple different ways. Great, you have no complaints. Is that based off of enough traffic coming to the site? So do you have enough people actually hitting the site? Have you looked at your analytics year over year? Are you seeing a growth or a decline? And is what you see in those analytics, is it what you would like to see from a positioning of your service and product mix? So do you have the appropriate traffic going to your top level, hero services and products? Just because you're not hearing anything is not necessarily an indicator that anything is good or bad. So you really need to dive into it a little bit. One thing I would say is, if you are accumulating email addresses, right, is your email growth coming from your site consistently going up month over month, year over year? If you don't see growth there and that's stagnant, then that means you're not really getting the traffic to your site and people are not interacting with the site. So that's a red flag. The other thing is, again, back to the emails. If you have a good email database, then I would actually leverage that and send out a survey to your existing customer base and ask them point blank about the site. Structure 3, maybe 4 questions, phrased differently, asking for different things related to the site, and throw in some other questions that are more business generic, to profile people, and get more intel, from your survey. Make it work for you. But I would look at those 2 things and then assess your site. Andrew, anything else you would add?
I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say do a survey. One, it makes the customers feel like they have some input in the company that they do spend a lot of money with, when it comes to their budget every year, depending if they use you for, heat and service and HVAC and stuff like that. It makes them feel like, hey, like these guys care about what we think, and it makes their lives easier if they can navigate to the things they want to. And then also, to get, just as a quick freebie, to get more opt-ins, if you do take the survey approach, give away a couple service contracts, give away some Amazon gift cards and stuff like that. It's a feel-good thing for your customer base, knowing that you're giving back to, the customers that, rely on you for, their heat and warmth and stuff like that. It works. So give something back, and survey your customers regularly. And if you want to know how your website's doing, ask them, because they're the ones that have probably either gone there and been satisfied, or they've gone there and been like, I'll just call.
Yep, exactly. And, and there's other things that you can do as well from an analytic point of view. One last bit on that one is, if you have a payment portal, and you have a button for people to access their portal, take a look and see how many people are clicking that button to access the portal. That gives you an indication of traffic volume from your website directly into the payment portal. So if those numbers seem off to you, again, that's a red flag. So, all right.
Awesome.
Yeah, we could keep going and going on this stuff. I
Yeah.
could spend all day on this, but anyway, we're going to keep this. I think we're at 40 minutes at this point. So thank you all for attending. Andrew, any last words here?
No, thanks everyone. Any questions, reach out, let us know. Try the Navara Power Score. It's a really good indication of how you're doing, with your overall marketing. And it does have a good inclusion of, how your website is as well. And reach out if you guys have any questions. Thanks for your time. Appreciate everything. Everyone have a great day.